Good afternoon. Glad you're with us. All right, let's turn our attention to the municipalities, the area of government that affects you the most. The National Assembly has now passed a Local Government Municipal Systems Amendment Bill. The name of the bill doesn't matter. What it's supposed to do is make changes to the way that councils appoint municipal managers and other senior officials. The previous law was found to be unconstitutional. You might have seen huge fights around the position of city manager, municipal manager. In Mangaung, the head of the Metro Police was caught on a cell phone camera literally trying to push the acting municipal manager out of his office. In Nelson Mandela Bay, I understand, 2 people claim to have been appointed city manager at one point. There are other examples. For some reason, many of them involve Northwest. Professor Jaap Visser is the director of the Dullah Omar Institute. He's been studying this. Professor, good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. What change is this going to make? How is this going to change the situations in municipalities?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and thanks for having me. I don't think it's going to change a whole lot. This is, as you say, this is actually the same bill that was passed in 2011, but which was struck down by the Constitutional Court in 2017, has now been revived. It was struck down because it was passed by Parliament in accordance to the wrong procedure. So the Constitutional Court said, please go do this again and use the right procedure. And in fact, the Constitutional Court gave Parliament 2 years to do so, and it was supposed to have been done by 2019, and is only done now. So it's not really a whole lot of new law, and most of local government already functioned mostly in line with these rules that are now being promulgated. So I don't think this is a silver bullet at all. It's mostly, as I would say, housekeeping to keep things, the legal framework in order. And also hopelessly delayed. But okay, what it does do is it determines criteria and procedures for the appointment of senior managers in local governments and organizes rules for the oversight by provinces over the appointments. So this very problematic area, as you just pointed out, of appointments and dismissals and suspensions of senior managers must now be done in accordance to this framework. But I'm a little bit cynical. The one major thing that has changed, though, and this is something to watch, is that any local government official will now be prohibited from holding office in a political party. In other words, you cannot be a municipal manager or even a senior manager or a middle management person and at the same time also be a treasurer or a branch chairperson or a member of a PEC. That will no longer be allowed. It was also in the original law, but only for senior managers. And government has now taken the bold step to say this now applies to all officials in local government. They may not also be office bearers in political parties.
I mean, this is in a way, it seems, an important step into what may be a longer-term trend towards, I'll call it the slight depoliticization of these appointments.
Absolutely, and they can step in the right direction. But the big question that we have to ask as well is, why does this only apply to local government? Because there's nothing that prohibits a director general or a head of department in a provincial government to also be a member of a political party. That's fine, but also then be a member of the PEC or the NEC for that matter. We don't seem to worry about that too much, but when it's local government, we say, no, this may not happen, and we make rules on it. Fair enough, it's a good rule, but I think this is the first step and must be followed through the rest of government, in my view.
So, I mean, what we've seen really is big political fights over who's going to be the city manager or the municipal manager. And in places like Nelson Mandela Bay, where, you've got a coalition that sort of just is able to govern, this becomes a very complicated fight. In eThekwini, we saw, in fact, eThekwini is maybe an even better example, the party of the deputy mayor turning against the ANC-led administration in eThekwini and refusing to ratify the decision. At its heart, is all of this a political problem? It's a failure of politics. If you don't fix the politics, I don't know how, but if you don't fix the politics, you don't fix the problem.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. We're trying to fix political problems with rules and more rules and more rules and more enforcement mechanisms. And in the end, these are very deep political problems. And it must be fixed at that level. We have a problem in local government that the appointment and dismissal and essentially the fate of senior managers is far too beholden to the politics of the day. So if the politics of the day changes, be it as a result of factionalism or coalition fights or whatever political reason, why must that always result in the dismissal or suspension of municipal managers? I'm a lawyer and I review the case law every year. And last year alone, in a period of 12 months, there were 30 high court cases precisely on this issue. And for me, that's a sign that we're on the wrong track. We don't even litigate evictions that often. But this silly thing of the fights over who gets to be senior official in local government seems to preoccupy us in the law, and that means we're trying to fix political problems with legal regulations, and in the long run it's not going to make much of a difference.
Professor Glottiano has been looking at this recently. He's a professor at the University of Johannesburg, and he has suggested perhaps that all of this goes back really to the way things were formed in 1994. He suggested the problem was that at that time there were very few, or almost none perhaps, progressive people with qualifications to actually run a city. And that meant that things had to change so that you could have, by progressive people he really means, I think, people willing to implement the ANC's agenda. I don't want to speak for him, but let me say that's my interpretation of it. Now, we're still not really recovered from that particular problem. When a political party wins in an administration, they should be able to govern. That means they should be able to appoint a city manager who sort of agrees with them. But the real fight is over the sort of.
Yes, and look, for example, how it worked before 1994 was that you could only be a town clerk if you were a member of the Town Clerks Association. And if you misbehaved, or if you didn't keep up with your points, your education points, the Town Clerks Association would chuck you out. And then you could no longer be a city manager. Now, of course, that system was designed also in a racist way, and it was used to keep out the black majority out of that profession. So that's why it was ditched, and it was abolished for good reason. But maybe we threw the baby out with the bathwater, because now we are leaving the appointment and the controlling the quality and the ethics of senior managers. We're leaving that to politicians, instead of leaving it to the profession itself and allowing the profession to regulate itself, just like doctors and lawyers do. If you misbehave as a lawyer, your peers will throw you out of that profession. If you misbehave as a doctor, your peers will throw you out. But if you misbehave as a senior manager in local government, it's up to the politicians, and then anything can happen. So I think we may have missed the boat and may have been too hasty in abolishing some of the systems that were wrongly applied, but had good systems to them that we actually need sorely right now.
You spoke about the problem of the politics. And I mean, there are various aspects to this. I mean, it would be easy to look at the salaries of the city managers of some of the big metros. I mean, these are some of the best paid people in government in some cases, and say the fight's actually all about the salary. It would seem to me it's actually much more likely that the fight is all about the patronage. And the city manager, I presume, and senior managers play quite a big role in deciding who gets contracts. And that's money flows.
Absolutely. I think it's more about that than about the salaries. It is about politicians who really want to have senior administrators in place that are beholden to them. So that when the time comes, a politician can walk up to a senior manager and say, listen, remember why you are there. Remember why you're in that position, and remember to whom you owe a certain debt. So when I come to you with certain things that I want to have happened, then you have to remember that. And I think that is really the kind of, and it's a form of state capture. It's a form of local capture, which begins right at this point, where we allow these appointments to be too driven by politics, by political interests. And once again, I'm not convinced that we're going to solve that by throwing more and more law and regulation and enforcement mechanism at this. We need to seriously look at the political root cause of these problems.
So, I mean, the politics is going to be difficult to fix. You suggest that the new law isn't that different from the old law. Did we miss an opportunity to do something, or it doesn't really matter what we do in the law? We're not going to fix it until we fix the politics, and that's a much bigger problem.
Well, the one thing that we can do, I suppose it is a legal approach, is to really think carefully about how do we remove this procedure and this decision around the appointment and dismissal of senior managers. How do we remove it from politics? Because at the moment we don't. We actually leave it to the politicians to make all those decisions. We need more checks and balances in that system, more independent verification. There's been calls to say maybe the Public Service Commission should play a greater role in local government staff appointments. Because at the moment, leaving all of this to councils overseen by a provincial politician in the MEC for local government, that system, in my view, is not working. We are allowing politicians to be too close to this process. and it seems that they simply can't help themselves.
Professor Jaap, Visser, thank you, Director of the Dullah Omar Institute. Really appreciate the time today.